Welcome back to the Ask Lee segment. It's Wednesday again, and this is where you can ask me any question about magic, witchcraft, spirituality, etc, etc, etc. Just leave your question in the comments below to one of the Ask Lee videos and I'll add it to the queue. And we're just going to go through some today, and it's getting a bit chillier here, so I think for the next few weeks you're going to see me in my old grandpa jersey, because I'm attempting to pre-record about 3 or 4 weeks and upload them. Alright, so let's get started. Welcome to my channel. You are entering the world of magic and mysticism with your host, Lee W. Johnson. Keep the lights on and help improve the channel by becoming a supporter for just $2.99 per month. Hit the join button. Okay, so straight into the questions. Let's see, this one, let me just put it this way so I can read it better. This one is from Words Have Power. What is your opinion on the use of marijuana and other substances for magical practice and meditation? Largely I wouldn't suggest it, and there's many reasons for that. Psychoactive plants, entheogens and such definitely have their place in magical practice and spirituality in general. They definitely have their place. The difficulty is that in a lot of cases what you really require is somebody who can guide you, and it's often in a group setting, and the guide will be able to take you through the whole process on that spiritual journey itself. This isn't an area I actually delve into myself. One of the main reasons being that marijuana for me is I hallucinate like crazy on marijuana. I'm just one of those people who just, I get the hallucinations, and the problem is, you kind of say, I get hallucinations, that should be a good thing. I get psychic visions, I hear people's thoughts, all of these things, so I have all these psychic experiences. The problem is it becomes so fragmented that I can't put anything together afterwards. So even though it's an interesting experience, it's kind of useless at the end of the day. Now, one of the other difficulties I think with using entheogens is that a lot of people make it a crutch. It becomes part of their regular practice. Something that was mentioned in one of Castaneda's books is that, because Don Juan obviously takes him through the various entheogens using datura, peyote, and then his little smoke, which is a mixture that he personally uses. And one of the things that Don Juan actually says to Carlos Castaneda is that these allies are not meant to be taken on a continuous basis. They are merely an introduction. So somebody may be having a bit of a challenge breaking through that barrier from what they consider to be the mundane physical world, and trying to break through that barrier into the ethereal, the non-ordinary realities and such things. And the entheogen can help you to break through that barrier. They are also excellent teachers, they are excellent allies, but that isn't just in the case of entheogens or psychoactive plants, it's also in the case of all plant lore. So all plants have a spirit, and those spirits can be teachers and allies. So you can, and weeds, go and have a look for dandelion or something in your garden, something that, we kind of consider to be a weed. It's actually not a weed. It's a very useful plant. A lot of what we now consider to be weeds are actually medicinal plants. So I once heard a good description of what a weed was. Weed is a plant that's in the wrong place. So anything can be a weed really if it's in the wrong place. But when it comes to psychoactive plants and entheogens, as I said, it's kind of just using it to break that barrier. Once you've broken the barrier, then you should pursue those practices without the use of the entheogens. They come into play again and again and again after that, but you should rely more on your own abilities and developing your own abilities rather than using the entheogen as a tool to continually carry on with the practices. Just have to wait for the helicopter to go over. Alright, so that's my opinion anyway. And let's go on to the next one. From Zamidge. Okay. I always appreciate your unbiased and multifaceted coverage of these complex and often controversial topics. It's my pleasure. Speaking of controversial topics, if memory serves, in a Black Hat chat a while back, that you stated rather plainly that you weren't a fan of the Grimorium Verum. I'm of a similar opinion about it, but still found it surprising given your normally diplomatic approach to these topics and the fact that I've had a handful of other left-hand path practitioners get quite mad at me for my negative opinions of the book. So it seems at least a few practitioners out there found it useful somehow. If it's not too controversial a topic and it hasn't been done before, I wouldn't mind an Ask Lee segment going into great detail about why you dislike it and what, if anything, you do like about it. Unless I'm misremembering this entirely, in which case never mind, and sorry for putting words in your mouth. Yes, I did say that in a Black Hat chat. And it's not just the Grimorium Verum. A lot of the medieval grimoires I don't find very useful. They do have their use. They do introduce particular spirits to us. They do give us an introduction to those spirits themselves. The problem I have with the Grimorium Verum specifically is that it is incomplete. You just start reading it and there's a seal right in the beginning which you're supposed to use, but nobody knows what the seal is. It has been, I'm not sure if the word pulled out or scratched out, or it's not present. It's not there. It was removed at some stage and nobody knows where the original text was in order to get that seal. So you start off with this book and there's already a very important part that's missing. So we start speculating and we start making assumptions and we start adding our own thing. Nothing wrong with that. We can take something and we can develop it into a practice. But that's just the start. And then you go through and it's just bits missing here and there and here, there and everywhere. But again, it comes back to the whole principle of these medieval grimoires being a Christian worldview. You have these demons which are evil, and you have to bind them and control them and threaten them and everything else, and that's not an approach I take personally. So apart from there being lists of spirits which we can then be introduced to, the rest of it I wouldn't even bother using. So I don't think they have much value for a demonolator. A lot will disagree with me. Some people will say that the introduction to demonolatry should be the Ars Goetia. No, definitely not. That's like reading a witch reading the Malleus Maleficarum and being that introduction to witchcraft. That's just such a bad way of going about it. So your introduction shouldn't be from a Christian worldview. It should be from a practicing demonolator's worldview, which is very, very different, or should be very, very different. So yes, I don't particularly like the medieval grimoires. There are a couple out there. There's still a few that I need to actually delve into and go through. If I had more time, I might be able to get to it. But with work, with this, with the classes, with teaching, and then I have my web development business, and etc., 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 etc. It becomes very difficult to get to a lot of these things. So I will get to them eventually. As I said, there are some grimoires which have some value, I believe. But the Grimorium Verum, the Ars Goetia, the Ars Goetia itself is a compilation of various other texts. So if you really want to understand the Ars Goetia itself, you need to go back and start reading 3 or 4 different texts that the information was taken from them and compiled into one new book. So it just becomes very much a case of guesswork at the end of the day. I do have interactions and I do communicate with the spirits from the Ars Goetia, but at the same time I often question whether these are purely egregores or whether they are the ancient gods and goddesses that we refer to, the Jinn, because the names in the Goetia aren't found in the original sources. There are allusions to them being similar names here and there, but you have a look at the original sources and they're very, very different. They're vastly different. So you kind of question where some of the names of these spirits came from in the first place. But if you are speaking to an egregore, or you're speaking to a god or goddess, or you're speaking to a Jinn, it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day, as long as you are getting the results you need, and everything's going hunky-dory. But just from a practical point of view, the grimoires themselves are not solid. I think people put too much emphasis on them as in the idea that they are these amazing, powerful books. They're not really. Anyway, so that's my opinion on that. Okay, well, we can definitely do another one. From Craig Burns. The Haitians say that great gods do not ride small horses. What do you think? I agree completely. They wouldn't. And it's not, I don't think it's really a case of, for anybody who's a bit confused about the horses part, in voodoo practices, it's the person who is invoking the spirit is the horse, and the spirit rides the person. If I got that right. Craig can correct me if I've got that wrong. But I don't really think it's a case of the person being small, as in not worthy, or something like that. I think it's more a case of the person needs to bring their vibration up to a certain point so that it matches the god that they are invoking. Because if you haven't got that match, it's kind of a slip and slide type of situation where the person's vibration is too low for the god to actually get a connection. If the person brings their vibration up high enough, then a connection can take place. So this was in relation to channeling a mediumship. Can't remember where I read it though, but it actually explained it really well. I'm sure it was in the Table Tipping for Beginners book. There was mention of this in there where a medium will only get the messages through if they have brought their vibration up to a particular level. Otherwise, it's kind of like tuning into a radio station and you kind of spin the dial and it just goes straight past the station. In order to tune into the radio station, you've got to find the right frequency. And finding the right frequency is that raising your own vibration to the same frequency as the spirit you're trying to communicate with, so that the two energies can meet and touch in order to actually get the communication. And I think it's the same case with deities invoking people, invoking in the sense of possession, riding. So I think that's what is really going on there. Okay, so I'm going to end today's questions, and we'll have more next week. All right, have a good one until then. Cheers for now. Bye bye.